What is going on, guys? Joseph Fulmer here, and today I am going to show you how to pull Cummins commonrail fuel injectors by hand with no special tools. I did this whole job, didn't have the injector, the feed tube pullers, do not have injector pullers. I did it all by hand. Now, first note of safety, make sure when you're removing your battery terminals on a diesel truck, take both negatives off, tuck them to the side. Then take your positives off, because you got to remember you've got two batteries, so if you get one negative off, you still have contact to ground. You can still short it out. Anyway, do me a favor while we're getting into this video. If you haven't hit the subscribe button yet, please do that. Hit the notification bell once you've hit that subscribe button. That way you get post notifications every time I put a new video up. Make sure if you have any questions, drop in the comment section. I'll be more than happy to try and answer them for you. Rate the video when it's all over with, and please. Now, once you've got your batteries disconnected, you're going to have to disconnect the air horn, get it out of the way. You also need to disconnect the electrical wires to the grid heaters. Grid heater needs to come out. Once you've got the grid heater out, I just put my bolts and nuts back where they went. That way I can remember when I put it back together. Get the plastic cover off the top. This is going to expose, and you have to pull the oil cap to get it off. This is going to expose the 6 bolts that hold the valve cover down. It's also going to expose your breather filter. Now, you get the front 4 bolts out with an impact like I did. You've got to have a socket or something smaller to get back underneath the cowling. Get the last 2 bolts loose. Once you get them out, before you can remove the valve cover, you're going to have to take a trim panel tool or a small pry bar and work the breather tubes off. So, get them loose, get them out of the way, and then, as you can see, it wasn't the easiest thing to do, and the larger of the 2 breather tubes actually bolts to, I think it might have been the dipstick tube, I don't remember exactly, but here in a second you're going to see me loosen that. I actually took the clamp off, that way I could rotate it out of my way, keep it from dropping crap on the top of the engine. But I got the valve cover off, pull the wiring harness, just unplug everything that's plugged into it so you can get it out of your way. Once you get the wiring harness and everything unplugged, then there is a lifting eye on the back of the engine. You need to get the lifting eye loose, because the lifting eye is blocking your access to the number 6 fuel injector line and feed tube. So go ahead and take the 2 bolts out to hold the lifting eye down and pull the lifting eye out of the truck. Now, once you've got the lifting eye out, I went through with masking tape and a Sharpie and marked all my injector lines just to make it easier to reassemble. And if I remember correctly, it is a 19 millimeter for the injector lines to crack the lines loose, and I know for a fact it is a 24 millimeter that holds the feed, that is the feed tube nut. So you will need a 24 millimeter socket, and you're also going to need a 24 millimeter wrench, because on one of the lines, yeah, I believe it's the number 3 line there, you have to use a wrench, or you will have to remove your map sensor. Now what I'm trying to show you here, which is kind of hard to tell, if you have a feed tube that gets stuck, the tube nut on the end of the injector line actually threads onto the feed tube. So you can break that loose, then you can hold the tube nut that's on the end of the fuel line while you take a 24 millimeter on the feed tube nut, and as you back the feed tube nut out, you hold the nut that's on the end of the fuel line tight, and the feed tube nut will actually put pressure on it, and if the O-rings are stiff or stuck, will help to pop that loose and pop that feed tube out. So that's just a little trick. If you don't have the puller where you can put a pry bar on it, you can actually, if you're gentle and you're careful, use the feed tube nut to help back that feed tube out, because it actually threads into the head. It doesn't thread onto the feed tube. The fuel line threads onto the feed tube, so you kind of use it like a puller.
Right. You do not want to do that.
Now, otherwise, on all of these feed tubes, aside from the first one, I actually pulled all of these by hand. Now in order to pull them by hand, once you get the fuel line off, you just get a really nice tight grip on the threads on the end of the feed tube. And I could get a grip on them with one hand. I could use my other hand in between the hand holding onto the feed tube and the head, and actually use my other hand as leverage, and they just popped loose, came right out. Now just work your way through and do this with all 6 feed tubes. And then if you notice, as I take each feed tube out, I am dropping the feed tube nut back over it and then threading the fuel line onto it. That way I keep each feed tube with its corresponding tube nut, or feed tube nut and fuel line, so that when I go to reassemble it, everything goes back where it came from. It just makes things simpler, cleaner. If you have an issue with one specific cylinder, everything goes back with that cylinder so that you can track your issue down later. Now, using this method, injectors 5 and 6 are the hardest ones to get out, but they actually do come out without too much difficulty. You just have to stretch way back in there under the cowling, and you can't quite get as nice of a grip on it. But that is, and this is what I was talking about. I dropped the feed tube nut back over it, and then I just thread the fuel line right back onto the top. That keeps everything nice, neat, and together. And that box right there, all I put in it were my feed tubes and my fuel lines. Now, going through with the ratchet, next thing you want to do is take the nuts off, basically take the wiring harnesses for the injectors off the top of each injector. You don't have to worry about dropping the nuts. They're captured by the wiring harness. So just take them loose, move all your wires out of the way. Once you've got the wires out of the way, you need to go back through the rocker arms for your exhaust valves. I just went through with an impact and buzzed them off. Take a paint marker, mark each one to its corresponding cylinder. That way you can put them right back, because the rocker arms are generally, especially on a 250 plus thousand mile truck, are worn into the push rods and everything else, and you want to get them all back together in the same spot. That way everything mates up nicely. So as I went through, I marked all of them. The only one I didn't mark was number 6, but because it's not marked, I know where it goes. So marked them all. The last 2 I had to use a ratchet to get up underneath the cowling and get them loose. And once I broke them loose, I just used my little electric ratchet, pull them all off, box them up separately. And once you get them out of the way, you're ready to pull the retainer bolts from your fuel injectors. Now just go through, take them all loose, but leave them in the fuel injector. Don't pull them out yet. I got my little magnetic tray. The easiest, quickest way to do this so that you don't drop any of them down the oil galley is to take a magnet, pull them out, drop them on your magnetic tray. They don't necessarily have to go back in the same spot. So just work your way through, pull all 12 of those out. And once you get all 12 of those out, you can go back in, and each injector directly above the hold down has a groove where a puller would go. And all I'm doing is sticking the end of the pry bar in that groove. And then if you notice, I'm hitting my hand. I'm not hitting the pry bar very hard. I'm just hitting the top of my hand, holding pressure on the pry bar with my other hand. And those upward jarring motion is just enough to pop the O-rings loose. And there's a metal retaining ring, and pop that loose and get that injector to pop up so that you can pull them out. Now I went through, I popped all 6 of these loose, and before you pull them out, you want to have something ready to put them in, because you have to be very careful. I cannot stress how careful you need to be. We're actually sending these out to be tested, and as long as they're good, we're going to reuse them. You do not want to drop them. You do not want to bang the injector nozzles, because if you crack an injector nozzle, that injector is done. So I took a piece of cardboard, and I took I believe it was an 1 3/4 hole saw, and just cut 6 holes in a piece of cardboard. And you can see I'm numbering them now. That way when we send them out to be tested, they know which cylinder they came out of. They can tell me if, cylinder 5 was a bad injector. And then with the holes in the cardboard, I just pull the injector out, drop it through the hole with the corresponding number on it, and then I can put them in this. I'll put them in the box that's sitting over here, but I also have another piece of cardboard that I poked holes in that you'll see here in just a second when I get all done, so that I can put the nozzles through a second piece of cardboard to keep them from getting banged around on
Be
anything.
real careful to catch some bastards.
And guys, I hope you enjoy this video. I hope this shows you that yes, you can do this without having the special injector puller tool. You just need to take your time and be careful, and you don't have to have the puller for the feed tubes. You can do this without the special tools. Just take your time, be careful, and you don't want to damage your injectors, you don't want to damage your feed tubes, or it's going to get expensive fast. So do me a favor, guys. Like I said, you have questions, put them in the comments section. Don't forget to rate this video, please. Share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't. Guys, don't forget, get out there and get your hands dirty. You might have a little fun doing it. We'll see you on the next one.